The kingdom of Ashvale had once glowed at night, or so the old kitchen women said, back when they told stories to keep the young maids awake through the long, cold shifts. They said the palace walls used to shimmer silver when the king walked through them, a light that came from deep inside a wolf's blood, a light that could not be faked or forced. That light had a name. The people called it Shimmer, and it was the truest sign of strength a wolf could carry. Wren Ashby had never seen it. Not once. Not in all her 19 years scrubbing pots and folding linens in the servants' halls. By the time she was old enough to understand what shimmer meant, the king's had already gone dark. They called him Cale Draven, the broken wolf, though never to his face. 5 years ago, his own cousin had turned against him, and in the fighting that followed, Cale lost the mate who was meant to steady his power, and with her, his shimmer disappeared. A king without shimmer was still a king by title, but the court no longer feared him, and fear, in Ashvale, was the only language that mattered. Wren knew all this the way she knew everything about the palace, quietly, from corners, never spoken aloud. She was an Omega, the lowest rank among wolves, and Omegas were taught early that the safest place to stand was nowhere at all. Don't be noticed. Don't be remembered. Do your work and disappear into the walls like smoke. She had one secret that made disappearing hard. When she sang, something happened. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was small, almost nothing. An injured dog in the kitchen yard would stop whimpering. A crying kitchen boy would fall asleep. Even the harshest cook, Mistress Odell, softened when Wren hummed while kneading dough, though the old woman would never have admitted it. Wren didn't understand the gift. She only knew that Omegas who stood out got punished, so she kept her voice for empty rooms and sleeping children, and told no one. It was a cold night in late autumn when everything changed. Wren had been sent to clean the west wing, a task the other maids avoided, because it meant passing near the king's private study, where servants said strange sounds came from behind the door sometimes, low growls, things breaking, silence that felt worse than the noise. She was almost past the door when she heard it. Not a growl this time, a sound like someone trying very hard not to make a sound at all, and failing. She should have kept walking. Every rule she had ever learned told her to keep walking. But the door was open a crack, and through it, she saw the king on his knees on the stone floor, his hands pressed flat against his chest, as if he were trying to hold himself together, his whole body shaking in a way that had nothing to do with cold. He did not look like a king. He looked like a man losing a fight no one else could see. Wren's feet moved before her mind caught up. She stepped inside. "My lord?" Cale's head snapped up, eyes wild, more wolf than man in that moment. He did not answer. His shoulders kept shaking, harder now, and something about the way he gasped told her this was not new. This was old pain, finally breaking through. She didn't think about rank or rules. She did the only thing she knew how to do. She began to sing, quiet and low, the same lullaby she used to calm frightened kitchen pups on stormy nights. The change was almost instant. The tremors slowed. Cale's breath, which had been sharp and broken, began to even out. His hands loosened from his chest. By the time Wren reached the end of the song, he was simply kneeling there, staring at her, still and silent, as though something inside him had gone quiet for the first time in years. "What did you do?" His voice was rough, more demand than question. "I don't know, my lord. I only sang." Wren's heart pounded so hard she thought he might hear it. "Forgive me. I shouldn't have come in." "Do it again." She hesitated, unsure if it was an order or a plea. His eyes, still faintly wild, held something close to desperation. "I can't promise it will work twice," she said honestly. But it did, and on the third night, when he sent for her without pretending it was for cleaning, they both stopped pretending it was an accident. Cale did not understand what she had given him, and that made him suspicious, as much as it made him grateful. A king who had lost everything once already did not trust easily, and an Omega with an unlisted power was, by every rule of the court, a danger that should be reported and studied, not welcomed into his private rooms. He told himself he kept summoning her because he needed to understand her ability. He told himself it was strategy, nothing more. But strategy did not explain why he found himself listening for her footsteps in the corridor before she even arrived. It did not explain why, on the nights she didn't come, the tremors returned worse than before, and he lay awake, gripping the edge of his bed, angry at himself for missing a servant girl's voice. Word spread quickly in a palace built on whispers. The king, visiting the kitchens. The king, keeping an Omega maid past midnight. His advisors grew uneasy. Lord Vantry, the king's own cousin, and the very man whose betrayal had cost Kale his mate and his Shimmer, used the rumors like a blade, sharpening them in every conversation. A king weak enough to be soothed by kitchen songs was a king weak enough to be replaced, he said, careful to smile as he said it. Wren heard the whispers too, in the washroom, in the halls, always just quiet enough that she wasn't meant to notice. She began to understand, piece by piece, what had truly happened to Kale. Not just the loss of his Shimmer, but the loss of the woman meant to be his mate, killed in the same uprising that stripped his power. He had not let anyone close since, not out of pride, she realized, but because closeness had once cost him everything he loved. She wanted, more than she expected to tell him she understood. But Omegas did not offer comfort to kings. Omegas served. Still, some nights, after she finished singing, and his shoulders had unknotted enough that he could breathe without shaking, he talked. Not about the coup, not at first. About small things. A hound he'd raised as a boy, the way his mother used to hum while sewing, the weight of a crown that never once felt like it belonged to him. Wren listened the way she sang, quietly, without asking for anything in return. She began to understand that Kale Draven was not broken because he was weak. He was broken because no one had ever let him grieve out loud, and a wolf who cannot grieve, cannot heal. The trial came on a gray morning 3 weeks later. Lord Vantry had grown bold enough to demand a formal hearing, claiming rights to lands that had once belonged to Kale's late mate's family, framing it as a matter of law when everyone in the hall understood it as a test. If Kale could not hold his composure in front of the full court, if the tremors returned in public, as they sometimes still did in private, it would be proof enough that Ashvale needed a stronger king. Wren was not meant to be anywhere near the great hall that day. Omegas did not attend court proceedings. But she stood at the edge of the servants' corridor, close enough to see through the side doorway, because something in her refused to stay away. It happened exactly as Vantry seemed to be hoping. Partway through his cousin's cold, careful accusations, Kale's hands began to shake at his sides. His jaw tightened. The court noticed, the way courts always notice weakness, a ripple of murmurs spreading through the hall like smoke finding every open space in a room. Wren did not decide to move. Her feet decided for her, the same as that first night outside his study door. She walked into the great hall in her plain gray servant's dress, past nobles who stared at her as if she had lost her mind, straight toward the king's chair, and she began to sing. The hall went utterly silent. It was a risk beyond anything she had ever taken. An Omega, singing to the king in open court, breaking every unspoken law about her place. She did not care. She watched his shoulders loosen the way they always did, watched his breathing slow, and for a moment, she thought that would be the whole of it, a small mercy no one else would understand. Then the light began. It started faint, almost imagined, a pale silver shimmer rising around Kale's shoulders, like mist catching the first light of morning. Gasps rippled through the hall. Nobles who had not seen true shimmer in 5 years leaned forward, disbelieving. Lord Vantry's confident expression cracked into something close to fear. Kale stared at his own hands, as if he did not recognize them, then lifted his eyes to Wren, and in that look was something she had never let herself hope for. Not gratitude, recognition. The days that followed were loud with argument. Some called it treason, and Omega somehow controlling the king's power through unnatural means. Others, more thoughtful, began to whisper an older idea, one nearly forgotten, that Shimmer was never only inherited through blood. It could be bonded, given strength by a true anchor, someone whose presence steadied a wolf enough to let their power surface again. Wren, they began to say, was not a threat to the throne. She might be the reason it still stood at all. Lord Vantry understood what that meant faster than anyone. If the court accepted Wren as Kale's true anchor, his own claim to power crumbled entirely. He moved quickly and without mercy, sending men to have her removed from the palace before she could be formally recognized, quietly enough that it might have looked like nothing more than a maid dismissed for insolence. Kale found out in time barely. He reached the servants' courtyard just as Vantry's men closed in around Ren, and for the first time in 5 years, his shimmer did not flicker or falter. It rose steady and full around him, silver light spilling into the gray morning, like something remembering exactly what it was meant to be. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The men stepped back on their own, some out of fear, some perhaps out of relief that their king finally looked like a king again. Vantry challenged him formally that same day, certain that whatever had returned to Kale could not possibly last. He was wrong. With Ren standing at the edge of the courtyard, not fighting for him, only present, only steady, Kale's power held through the entire challenge, and Vantry was defeated before the sun had fully risen. The court that had doubted Kale for 5 long years watched their king stand afterward, Shimmer glowing quiet and constant around him, and understood at last that his strength had never truly been gone. It had only been waiting for something worth holding on to. That evening, Kale found Ren in the kitchens, exactly where she had always tried to disappear. He asked her, in front of Mistress Odell and every wide-eyed kitchen boy who had ever fallen asleep to her humming, to stop hiding. "I don't know how to be anything else," she admitted quietly. "Then let me help you learn," he said, and it did not sound like a command from a king. It sounded like a man asking for the same thing she had given him, without ever meaning to. Someone willing to stay. He did not offer her a title as a reward, as if her worth needed a court's permission to be real. He offered her a place beside him, as an equal, as the anchor his power had needed all along, and in doing so, he overturned centuries of law that said an Omega could never stand so close to a throne. Ren said yes, not out of fear, and not out of duty, but because for the first time in her life, someone had asked what she wanted, instead of telling her what she was allowed to be. Months later, on a clear evening when the whole court gathered beneath a sky full of early winter stars, Ren sang once more in the great hall, this time not to calm a trembling king, but simply because she loved to. The silver light around Kale rose bright and unwavering, and for the first time since anyone could remember, the palace walls themselves seemed to catch that glow, shimmering softly, the way the old stories said they once had. The broken wolf was gone. In his place stood a king who had learned that strength was never about hiding what hurt. It was about finding the one voice steady enough to help him carry it.